I personally, I like the SWOT analysis, all right? The author of our materials does not. Being of more British influence, since it's from Australia, if you know anything about UK, Australia, or any British-influenced country, they have a tendency to lean towards the PESTLE analysis. Anybody ever do a PESTLE analysis? P-E-S-T-L-E? Or P-E-S-T-E-L? Excuse me, I always misspell it, because I'm not from Great Britain. Okay, so, they prefer that. We'll look at it in one of our slides. We'll explain it to you. It's a little bit more involved than the SWOT analysis, and they seem to prefer that as doing an environmental scan. They like the PESTLE analysis. I still think the SWOT analysis is just easier to do. And there's really nothing in the PESTLE analysis that you can't use in the SWOT analysis anyway. So it's a little more refined, and we'll explain why they use it. Some of the things we're going to see here is something called the micro and the macro environment. It's not really the same as external and internal environment, okay? Macro, if you think of macro, you're thinking of the broader view, okay? The macro environment is what influences an organization or a business from the larger picture, the global picture, okay? Things like global economies, things like political structure of companies of countries where we operate, various governmental laws, environmental protection. All of that is what we call the macro environment view, okay? So we're going to see that in here. The micro environmental view is the smaller picture. If you think of it as the big view or the little view, micro is looking at the company from a much smaller perspective, more of a local view of the company. Rather than looking globally, micro environment looks at a company only as to what influences it in a local process, such as employees, customers, suppliers, okay? Those are more the micro view of an organization, okay? The local influencers. The macro view are the influences that are more globalized, okay? Is that kind of understandable? Okay, and we'll go through it. I just want to make sure you understand, because they talk a lot about it. And then, of course, from that macro view, we get into the PESTLE analysis, which we'll take a look at. It's not really a big deal. It's just another anachronism. Also, on the micro view side, we're going to look at two, and again, what would an MBA course be without theories? You've probably seen Porter, and you will see Michael Porter over and over and over again, not just in this course. He touches into everything. Any management course you have, you're going to have Michael Porter's theories in there. Particularly, has anybody had marketing yet? Okay. When you get into marketing, believe me, you'll have Michael Porter, because you have Porter's, the 4 Ps of marketing. Okay, that's all Porter. And Porter is actually, I think he's dead now, but I mean, Porter was a pretty bright guy, very good management theorist, okay? And a lot of his principles are very relevant, and some of them are, a little questionable now in a globalized environment. So we're going to look at that, because Porter influences both the micro and the macro. On the micro side, we're going to look at Porter's diamond, and on the macro side, we look at Porter's 5 forces model. Okay, so we're going to look at both of those. Frameworks, those are all the frameworks for external analysis. We'll talk about those. So that's pretty much what we're going to do in this chapter. Not all this material is ultra exciting. Some of it is a little dry, but we try to get through it, okay? There's 1 or 2 slides in here also that I'm going to just tell you they're for reference only. I'm not going to go into a lot of any explanation in class. I know there's one in this program today. I'm just going to say, look, this slide is in there for your reference only. You're not going to even use it on the exam, but I did put it in there because it has some good information. If you ever had to go back and use these slides as reference material, I try to give you a little bit of everything. So this is your reference material, okay? So with a macro environment, again, just think of the macro as the wide view, okay, the global view. The environment external to the organization, its operations, and its entire industry. Okay, that's the macro environment. It's things that impact an organization, but the organization has little, if any, control over those elements. Macro environment factors strongly influence, of course, what we're talking about, the strategy of an organization and how it has to adapt to compete successfully within its markets and still remain profitable. That's part of the macro environment. So we're looking at the big picture. The organization has little to no influence over these factors. The most important element of macro environment is the direction in which it's trending. So we look at trends, what's the political trend? What is the economic trend? That's the most important thing. A company has to base its strategy on economic trending. And economic trending is not a micro view, it's a macro view. Because today, we just can't look at, our individual industry and the individual country where we operate. If we're globalized, we have to look at a much bigger picture, okay? And again, one of the best tools for considering trends in the macro environment is everybody's favorite, the pestle analysis, okay? And we're going to look at that. Surprisingly, the pestle analysis used to be called the pest analysis, okay? And they added 2 more legs to it, okay? But it used to be PEST. And then they added to it later on environment and legal. And that's where they got the pestle analysis. So basically what a pestle analysis looks at from the macro viewpoint, okay, they look at these elements or factors. So when I'm doing an environmental scan of my organization against the global process, and I want to formulate some strategies, this is in the early strategy building, I do a scan. How is all these global factors impacting my company, and how can I best build strategy to fit within all of these different elements? So some of the things that a company looks at in a pestle analysis, number one, the P part is political factors. Okay, so if I have a multinational corporation, I have divisions in different countries around the world, do I have to be concerned about the political factors in those countries? Does that impact my business? Absolutely. Do I control them through my business? No, I have no control over them, but I have to look at them. So if I'm expanding into Africa, for example, and I have operations in different parts of Africa, there's a lot of political instability in Africa right now. I definitely have to take that into consideration, okay, when I'm either expanding operations or if I'm just running operations. So that would be part of our pestle analysis. The other one would be, of course, economic factors. That's probably the biggest, okay? Economies, change almost daily. So, which is why when organizations no longer really make these very long-term strategies, 10, 12 years, they can't, specifically because of economies. Economies are constantly in flux. So we have to constantly be watching economies and adjusting our strategy, okay, to kind of mesh with the different changes in economic factors. The S part, of course, are social factors that we have to consider. Socialization, we have to consider community involvement, different social factors in different parts of the world. That can include culture. Does a company have to be concerned about different cultures where they operate different divisions? Absolutely. So if I have a corporate division in the United States, I have different divisions in the Middle East, in Asia, in Africa, I have to consider the social factors or the cultural factors that will impact my business. They impact the employees in that business, they impact suppliers, they impact customers, okay? Technology factors are something we always look at. We'll spend quite a bit of time discussing technology and competitive advantage. Here's what gives a company competitive advantage very frequently. Most companies, really, if they don't stay current on technology, they frequently are overtaken by competitors. They don't normally stay at the top. Technology is a really critical component, okay, of any organization's survival. The legal factors, of course, are government regulations. If I'm operating an organization with multi-divisions on a global scale, I have to take into consideration things like minimum wage standards, maximum hours of work standards, health and safety standards, and so on. We'll go through these also. I have slides for each. And then, of course, environmental factors. Everybody's concerned about environment. I think I have the last two reversed on here, by the way. I have to change it. I should have put environmental and then legal. Yeah, I know. I screwed up. The problem is I created this in a different program and downloaded it to PowerPoint. So for me to go in and change it now is a lot more work. So I didn't really have time. Yes?
Very big organization, do they still apply the same principles or is there a different analysis for them? So in other words, government organization.
Oh, you mean like a nonprofit, or yeah, and that's a good question. Yeah, a government organization or a nonprofit organization will still look at the same factors. Okay, the subsets change, but a government organization can do a pestle analysis. Okay, but of course, some of the factors affect the government or nonprofit differently than they would affect a for-profit private industry. But that's a good question. Yes, we have some, and I tried to include in these slides some crossover between private and public, or government and private, just so you do see some connectives. Okay, the problem you have, of course, is in our material. They have a tendency to concentrate more on private sector, and they kind of forget about government and nonprofit. And I like to group nonprofit with government, because there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there that aren't government, but they're also not private. They're nonprofit. Okay, networks and certain private TV networks and so on. Okay. So, yes, these are applicable across government sector as well as private sector or nonprofit. Yeah, absolutely. As I said, so the standards may change a little bit. Okay. Yes?
How we are comparing Pestel compared to SWOT when it is only talking about external?
Yeah, well, that's the issue. See, a SWOT analysis looks at internal and external, and it's a good question. The pestle analysis, if you remember, let me go back a second here, is part of the macro, which is the big external environment. Okay, pestle is more external. It definitely is. Okay, so which is why I still kind of like the SWOT better. All right, so I'm giving you both here. This is your book really pushes this. Okay, in fact, there's a I think it's even in this book. It even criticizes the SWOT in here. The author actually criticizes the SWOT and says we're not going to even use the SWOT analysis. Well, I don't know. I don't particularly agree with it. I like the SWOT, particularly because of that. It's easy to understand. It delineates between external and internal environment very clearly. Okay, so but it's okay. This is more of an external look. But well, the technology factor, it can be part of the micro, but when we're looking at the big picture, changes in technology impact the company globally, and the company has very little to do about it. So as technology changes globally, that's the idea here, the company has to keep up with it internally. Okay, but the impact of technology is external. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, but that's a fair question. Okay, so we'll look at some of the elements very briefly. The PEST, political, I couldn't fit them all on one screen. So political elements would be things like taxes, minimum wage, export incentives, government stability, and so on. All of those are part of the political environmental scan that companies perform. Economic, of course, looks at capital, looks at labor, looks at resources, and a variety of other things. The social is trends against unhealthy activities, wealth, demographic trends. They look at average age. They look at religious trending. They look at movement of populations from one area to another. and so on. So all of that is part of the social side. Technology, we have two different types here. We have disruptive technology, and disruptive technology is technology that appears with little warning and has a significant impact on how business is conducted in an industry, which kind of gets back to your question. As technology changes rapidly, okay, it can actually become disruptive to a company who isn't keeping up with technology. All right? Many companies have kind of fallen from their position because they didn't stay current with technology. Okay? I mean, if you think of organizations like IBM and Xerox, part of their issue was they were so arrogant because they thought their technology was the best that they never really looked at the external environment of technology, and companies that came along that kind of overtook a company like Xerox, a Panasonic, Canon, Ricoh, and some of these other manufacturers, their technology was much more current, and that's why they were much more successful. And Xerox kind of went into an economic decline. It's one of the reasons. There were other reasons too. But technology is definitely a big impact. Obsolescence of technology and development of new technology to maintain competitiveness. So that's what we're talking about. I mean, if you think about it, in any environmental scan, when we talk about obsolescence, you know, what becomes obsolete probably quicker than anything? It's got to be technology, all right? Because technology is constantly being changed and hopefully improved. And we, as organizations, we have to keep up with that technology. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, you know, you have to keep current with technology in order to maintain, and the word will keep coming up, competitive advantage. Okay? Does that make sense? Oh, okay, good. So the other two elements that they added later were environment and legal. So environment looks at something, and that's a very popular word, carbon footprint. Has anybody heard that before? What is a carbon footprint? Huh? Greenhouse gas, yeah, that's true, yeah. But how's the word used? We hear I mean, how many people are familiar with the word? I should ask that first. Nobody. That's why nobody's answering the question. Okay? Yeah, it's kind of a buzzword, all right? You know, a kind of a cliche. Yeah, I know you would probably know it because you've been in the West.
But it's very American.
Yeah, it is very American. I didn't want to say that. I said West. But it is very American.
I think it's to do with the impact that we as humankind will do on the earth.
Yeah, we as humankind, but in this case, it's looking at the impact the business has on the environment, okay? So if a company comes into a community and opens up operations, and maybe they're a chemical manufacturer, okay? What kind of carbon footprint are they leaving there? You know, are they polluting the air? Are they polluting the water? Are they, they putting, is there a lot of stuff going up their chimney, their smokestack, and it's going into the air, okay? That's carbon, all right? And that gets back to what you mentioned. That's, they claim, okay, is impacting global warming, okay? Fossil fuels, any organization, companies that are burning fossil fuels are increasing, if you will, their carbon footprint, okay? So it's an environmental term, all right? Carbon footprint, meaning when I open a business, if I'm not running a clean energy type of business or I'm not doing recycling and so on and so forth, okay, I'm generating a lot of waste. I'm generating carbon waste. I'm generating basically garbage waste and so on. All right? Or if I'm running a nuclear power plant, what do I need to cool down a nuclear power plant? Usually they're built on rivers because they use the water to cool the plants down. And when that water gets returned to the river, it's warm. In some cases, it's hot. Okay? All of that factors into what they call leaving a carbon footprint. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, you will also hear a term that's non-environmental while we're on the subject, about a company. Sometimes you'll hear a multinational, part of their strategy is to reduce their footprint, their global footprint. That's not an environmental. What do you think that might mean? Okay? Part of my strategy in the next 5 years is to reduce my global footprint.
To reduce your activity in the world?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to close some of my operations. I'm reducing my impact, my footprint. Okay? So if I have operations in Europe, that means I have a foot in Europe. If I have a foot in Europe, I have a footprint. I'm going to reduce that footprint. How? By closing my operations in Europe. Okay? It's a term that a lot of organizations use. Okay? Non-environmental. When you see carbon footprint, it's basically the same thing, but from an environmental point of view. Right? Everybody got that? It's not real critical, but it's in your materials. I was actually surprised to see it from Australian material, because you're right. It's a very American term. Okay? So once in a while, there's a ray of hope in our material, a bright spot. No, I'm joking. Anybody from Australia in here? So part of environment, carbon footprint, compliance with environmental laws, okay? Corporate social responsibility, we've discussed that, and we'll discuss that more, okay? How many people are familiar with corporate social responsibility? Okay, I know from my last class, all right? And part of corporate social responsibility we learned in our last class, and many of you will get that when you take that class, is what we call triple bottom line. Triple bottom line is part of corporate social responsibility. Triple bottom line. Is everybody familiar with the term bottom line? What's the company's bottom line? What are we talking about when we say bottom line? Profit. Exactly. Well, triple bottom line, okay, for you people that are green or you people that are very social, okay, you'll like this. You'll like the triple bottom line. Who wants to tell me what triple bottom line means? Who remembers? Well, we'll let somebody up here answer.
Business philosophy of the organization to manage the effect of the environment and social and
Yeah, do you remember the 3 Ps? What were they? Do you remember? One was profit. Good, yeah, you got it. That's the 3 Ps of the triple bottom line. Profit, we know. The other 2 are people, social, and planet, environmental. So what they're saying is corporate social responsibility involves the triple bottom line. Organizations no longer should be concerned solely with coming in, building an organization in a community, okay, and sucking everything they can out of that community, okay? They suck all the labor out, which is good because they create jobs, they generate income, they pay taxes, but sometimes they also use all the natural resources if they don't recycle. And the other thing they do is they leave a big carbon footprint because they pollute. So triple bottom line, part of corporate social responsibility, this is kind of a new trend, all right? The idea is that companies can be very profitable not just by paying attention to money profits, but also by taking care of other responsibilities such as people, meaning the people in the community they serve and their employees as well. And the third link is taking care of the planet. Companies have a responsibility, in addition to making a profit, to take care of their employees and the people, and also not pollute the planet, the environment. Does that make sense? Okay. Does everybody like corporate social responsibility? No? Okay. You know, the funny thing is, it's trending now. And if you do research on corporate social responsibility, one of the fears behind corporate social responsibility is the word social, because they fear it's extremely overly socialized, okay, as in socialism, all right? That's one of the fears with corporate social responsibility. So there's kind of 2 different points of view on it. But overall, that's the whole idea behind corporate social responsibility. Customer demands, of course, regarding environmental impact of corporations. So the environment is a big consideration, all right? If I'm going to expand my operations as part of my strategy, and I'm doing a pestle analysis, even if I'm looking at different parts of the United States, okay, or North America, all right, I'm probably more likely, if I'm operating an organization that generates a certain degree of carbon or pollutants, and I'm looking at North America where to expand my operations, where am I going to go? Am I going to go to Canada, the U.S., or Mexico? What do you think? Why Mexico?
Because no regulations.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say none, but very lax. Okay? If I wanted to put it only in the United States, what would probably be the last state I would consider because of environmental regulations? Anybody want to guess? You should know that. You're from the States. Who's got the most stringent environmental regulations? What state? California, also referred to as the left coast, for obvious reasons. California, very strict environmental regulations there. Even they have special gasoline they sell in California that blends they have to make in California because of environmental regulations. They have all kinds of special laws, special environmental protections. I mean, it's getting to the point now, if you're walking on a street in Los Angeles and you sneeze, now you can be fined for polluting. No, I'm joking. We're saying, really? Very strict environmental laws. If you don't cover your mouth when you sneeze, that's a violation. Okay, the last leg of the pestle is legal, and they added this later. You know, and this is very related to political. The political side of pestle and the legal side of pestle are close. Okay, they're related. But the legal looks at, result of political decisions. So political decisions on the political side lead to the legal side, which are the laws. All right? So all the government legislation, labor, regulatory compliance, environmental, financial, safety, health, product standards. Is there regulation that regulates product standards? Sure. If anybody has children, I mean, if you buy baby stuff, there's all kinds of government regulations for baby carriages and car seats and all this stuff, okay? Even milk products. There's lots of government regulations for safety in there. So all of that is part of the legal side. And then, of course, you have to consider licensing that are required by law. That's a legal issue. Permits, tariffs, import-export requirements, and, of course, fines. So when I'm doing an environmental scan on a pestle analysis, the macro view, particularly if I'm looking at expansion, I'm looking to expand globally, there's a lot of elements I can look at, particularly on the legal side. Where am I going to pay more for tariffs, import-export costs, fines, and so on. So that's going to have an impact on where I put my business, okay? Now, is there anything in there, those of you that are familiar with the SWOT analysis, is there anything in here or here that you can't do on a SWOT analysis? No. I rest my case, okay? This is a little more defined, okay? But if you're doing an opportunity, threat, external, strength, weakness, internal, you can still incorporate all of these same elements. It's very easy to do, okay? So, I rest my case. National competitive advantage. This looks at more micro. So it's the features of the local environment that provide a competitive advantage for organizations located there. So if we're only competing on a national level rather than a global level, this would be applicable. Okay? And this is where Porter's Diamond comes in. It's the micro view. The criticism of Porter's Diamond, and Porter's Diamond was probably written some 30 years ago or so. It was one of his earlier theories. The criticism of the Porter's Diamond, we're going to show it to you. All right? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because most theorists today feel that Porter's Diamond is kind of, they feel that Porter didn't really see the challenge of globalization. And when he wrote the Porter's Diamond for the micro view of environment of an organization, they felt that Porter was looking at it more from a competitive framework within the same country rather than in a global view. Okay, so I want to make sure you understand that, and it's in your materials. So Porter's Diamond, although it's worth looking at, today it's kind of criticized as passé. It's kind of old. All right, It's not applicable as strongly as it was at one time. So these factors are critical for success of business in the global arena because we still have to compete. Companies often establish concentrated locations to gain access to advantages that exist there, such as, so what we're looking at now, we take Porter's Diamond. Porter's Diamond was more for a domestic competition. They've expanded it a little bit to apply to global. And when you think of it from a global point of view, this is where it can be utilized. And you may be familiar with this. Concentrated locations. How does a company set up a concentrated location, such as in technology? In China, for example, they actually have manufacturing and industry zones in China, where that's all they do, is manufacturing. They're concentrated, okay? Because that gives them a level of strength and it enables them to compete much better in a zone than they do if they were scattered all over. And another example of that, anybody familiar with Silicon Valley in California? That's where they make all the microchips and everything. Very popular, although a lot of companies are moving out of Silicon Valley now, all right? But years ago, if you thought of the technology sector, development of all the chips that are used in all the technology, like computers and space exploration and so on, everything was manufactured in Silicon Valley, California, okay? It was big. And Silicon Valley is right near, where? I had it on the tip of my tongue. San Jose, right? You've been there? Yeah, San Jose, California. That's near Silicon Valley. So when you heard Silicon Valley, all your chip manufacturers, they're competitors, but they were all in a centralized location because that gave them basically a level of power, a level of establishment. Their suppliers are close by and so on. Their shipping methodologies were close by. And it was much easier for those organizations to compete globally when they were in that zone. And I want to use that word zone because that's our next example. Where do we see this now? Now we see it in free trade zones, Middle East, Asia, and South America. They have trade zones everywhere here in the Emirates. They have it in Sharjah, in Ras Al Khaimah, in Abu Dhabi. I don't know where else, but I'm sure they...
The biggest...
Dubai. Yeah, Dubai, yeah. So they're all over. So they have these free trade zones that make it easier for businesses to set up, to operate. There's a variety of advantages to that, for tax advantages, tariff advantages. So it enables companies to what? Compete better, okay? So there's a competitive advantage to that. And that's what they're talking about, national competitive advantage where companies are grouped together. And you find those in Europe as well, okay? So concentrated locations help protect industries from competition located in other countries. They operate as a unit. Even though they're independent of each other, they do operate as a unit, okay? So this is Porter's Diamond. It's there for your reference. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because, again, it's kind of old. It's part of your materials. Is it going to be on your exam? No. It won't be. But it's in your slides for reference. There may come a time, when you're in an economics class or a marketing class and you have something comes up on Porter's Diamond, you say, oh, yeah, I have that in my strategic management material. So you got it there for your reference, okay? I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's not worth the time it would take. So we're doing a micro external environment analysis, the smaller picture now, okay? It's defined as the conditions in the organization's industry or the environment immediately surrounding the organization. The environment that immediately surrounds the organization. The local environment, not global, the local environment of an organization. The things that are close, I don't mean in distance, okay? I mean in functionality. The things closest to the organization. Example, micro external environment results from behaviors of other organizations in the industry, suppliers to the industry, customers of the industry. See, the things that are closest, okay? What are closest to a company? Are suppliers close to the company? Yes. Are customers close to the company? Yes. Organizations attempting to enter the industry, and micro external environment is best considered by looking at Porter's 5 forces model. So when we think of the micro external environment, then we'll look at Porter's 5 forces model, which is still in existence today. It's still studied today. And I've had this in some other courses as well. So Porter looks at competing companies. It looks at companies trying to manufacture substitute products to compete with another company. It looks at new companies that are trying to enter the market of that particular product. And then it also looks at customers, and it also looks at suppliers. That's the Porter's 5 forces model, and we're going to show that. So you have 3 horizontal elements in the Porter's 5 force model. You have competition from substitutes, competition from new entrants into the market, and competition from established rivals. So you can pick any industry, okay, any sector of industry. You have people that manufacture substitutes to what you make. You have people trying to enter that market to compete with you, and then you have the people that are already competing with you, okay? I mean, you can drill it down to a very simple process. We'll go back to donuts. That's about simple, rather than look globally. Donuts. I own a donut shop. There's a donut shop 2 blocks away from me. That is my direct competitor, okay? They compete with me for donut customers. Then I have competition from a substitute. There's a coffee shop down the street from me. No, they don't sell donuts, but they sell cinnamon buns, those sneaky devils. They're trying to get customers to go buy cinnamon buns as a substitute for my donuts. Okay? Does that make sense? I try to simplify this so you understand the model. I know it's a little silly, but it simplifies it. Then, now I've got a new entrant. Somebody's coming on the block, is opening up a shop a couple of blocks away, and they're going to open another donut shop. So you know what? I think I can break into this donut business in town. So now I have existing competitors, okay? I have substitute, that bum down the street trying to sell cinnamon buns and steal my customers with a substitute product. And now I have some new guy thinking that he's going to be able to compete against my donut business, getting into the market. Make sense? Okay. Those are called the horizontal elements. The vertical elements are the suppliers and the customers and the power they have. So we go back to my donut shop. Who is my supplier? What do I buy? What kind of supplies or suppliers do I need for my donut shop? Well, I have to buy what? Flour from a flour supplier. I have to buy milk from a milk supplier. I have to buy powdered sugar, the fillings, yeast, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Coffee, whatever I serve, all right? So every business has suppliers, right? So the question is, do suppliers have any element of power over the people they sell to, all right? So you have to look at this in reverse. So a supplier is my supplier. I buy things from them. If I'm the supplier, I'm their what? Good, I'm their customer. Yeah, you see? It just depends which side of the donut aisle you're on. And then over on this side, what am I doing with my donuts? I'm selling them to customers, okay? So I have suppliers over here, I have customers over here, and I'm in the middle. So when we look at this, there's a simple referral here, and you're going to see this periodically through our program in the next couple of weeks. So what we call the piece over here where I'm buying raw is so the flour, the sugar, and so on, those are raw products, raw materials. Doesn't matter whether I'm a donut guy or whether I'm a high technology sector person. It makes no difference. It's the same thing. I'm buying raw materials. Those are called inputs because they're coming into my company, right? Inputs. When I have them in my company, what am I doing? I'm processing, right? Okay? We'll learn later, because this comes up again in our later chapter, we probably get to today. So when I'm working, now I'm taking the flour, I'm taking the milk, I'm using water, I'm using the sugar, I'm using the ingredients, blah, 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 blah. I'm mixing it up, I'm baking, I'm adding value. So that the original raw material, okay, isn't worth as much as my finished product's going to be worth, right? And what's the difference between what I buy the raw material at, what it costs me to make it, and what I sell it to my customer? Profit. We all want to make profit. So the name for that, whether it's donuts or whether it's a major industry, what I'm doing is called, anybody know? You're close. It's processed, but they have an Americanized name, but they actually use it in Australia too. It's called throughput. Input, throughput, the process, you're right, it's process. And what's the last one? Output. Going to whom? Customer. Input, throughput, output. That's it. Everybody understand that? We can go home now. No. If you understand that basic concept, then this becomes much easier to understand, okay? And I know you're probably sitting there saying, what is donuts and strategy? What does that have to do with strategy? Well, because this is the basic strategic process, is knowing what my inputs are, what my throughputs are, and what my outputs are. And my strategy is to create what? What's the word I keep saying we always want to have? CA, competitive advantage. You got to remember that. That's the overriding theme in this course. Competitive advantage. How do I gain competitive advantage? I look at my inputs, I look at my throughputs, and I look at my outputs. And what I want to do is increase the output side, okay? Because if I get more money over here, then I'm gaining more competitive advantage. And to do that, I have to have more customers. That's right. And that's what I'm doing in my throughput. I'm creating more value. And that whole process, from inputs to the final outputs, the fact that I'm creating value is called value chain. And we'll see that later too, okay? So everybody understand that now?
By reducing this processing. By reducing processing space.
Well, yeah, when I create more efficient process, then I'm actually adding value. Okay, and it's costing me less. That's right, that's all part of throughput. Because we hear that word, continuous improvement. Has anybody heard that word, continuous improvement? It comes out of total quality management. Continuous improvement. When I was in manufacturing for Tyco, I can't tell, I used to get sick. I got as sick of hearing that as you're going to get sick of hearing competitive advantage. Okay? Everything was continuous improvement. But the idea behind continuous improvement is to improve inputs, throughputs, and outputs, because as we have continuous improvement in that process, we become more efficient. If we become more efficient, we make more money. Because the more efficient, and it's not so much that if I become more efficient, can I sell my donuts for more money? Or is there another way I make more money? If I become more efficient in my throughput, it's costing me less to manufacture, so that whatever I'm selling it for, I'm going to make more money. That's the idea behind efficiency. If I make a process more efficient, and it costs me less. Maybe I'm doing it with less employees, I'm automating, I'm eliminating bottlenecks in the process. If I get more product out more efficiently, okay, one, I can make more product and sell more. Two, I can make it less and make more money that way. So I make it on volume, I make it on cost. Make sense? The more efficient I make my process, my strategy may be, I want to become, in Abu Dhabi, I have a strategy. I want to become the low-cost producer of donuts. So to become the low-cost producer, I might want to squeeze my supplier. I want to improve my efficiency, okay? And I want to generate a stronger customer base. I don't want to raise my price. I want to be low-cost producer. The more donuts I can make and the more efficiently I can make them, the cheaper they become. And I still make profit. Does that make sense? Okay? Okay. We'll see this. I mean, that's the small view, the donut view. Okay? So, getting back to Mr. Porter, this is Porter's 5 Forces competition framework. So we see everything we mentioned is up there now. In the middle, you have the rivalry, the two donut companies banging each other's heads over, okay? The rivalry between competing firms, the two donut shops, the two technology sectors, okay? The two automobile dealers, or the two automobile companies, Ford and GM, rivalry among competing firms. Doesn't matter what level, okay? It's all the same thing. I like donuts because, number one, as you can see, I like food, okay? And when I teach, I get hungry, so I always use chicken, donuts, as examples. And I really love donuts, but they hate me. They hate me. So, rivalry among competing firms. So, on top, I have threats from substitute products. That's the guy that's going to open a shop and sell what? Coffee and cinnamon buns. Substitute product. Why should I care that somebody's going to offer a substitute product? Because they're going to try to steal what?